Time magazine has named Pope Francis as the Person of the Year, and of course this has been a very controversial decision, but that's what magazines usually do. They like to name a controversial figure as the Person of the Year so people like us will talk about it. Now, there was an article written about this decision by Nancy Gibbs, and the article was terrible. It was the hardest thing to read. Look, we can have an argument about whether or not Pope Francis should be named the Person of the Year, but the way that she wrote about him made him seem as though he is the single most important person in the universe, okay? So just to give you a little taste of what she wrote, Nancy writes, in his 9 months in office, he has placed himself at the very center of the central conversations of our time about wealth and poverty, fairness and justice, transparency, modernity, globalization, the role of women, the nature of marriage, the temptations of power. So that part of her piece is actually 100% accurate, right? And I think she makes a good justification there.
Although the writing, again, it's a little questionable there. He's put himself at the center of central questions.
Yes, yeah, I noticed that too.
Okay.
Yeah.
Has he also put himself in the middle of questions in the middle? Okay, anyway, yes. What else?
Then she continues. She says, Vatican bureaucrats and clergy stand accused of an infighting, graft, blackmail, and an obsession with small-minded rules, as Francis puts it, rather than the vast possibilities of grace. Don't just preach. Listen, he says. Don't scold. Heal.
Okay, look, I like the guy, so I'm not hating on her. Mm-hmm. Like but the problem is, it's like, when someone is popular in the press, they get these articles written about them, like in this case, like almost like they're deities, right?
That's exactly the case. So I know we're not giving you guys the best examples. You have to read the article in its entirety and then you'll understand what we're saying. But just one more snippet, Cenk, because I just have to read this part. She also writes, when he kisses the face of a disfigured man or washes the feet of a Muslim woman, the image resonates far beyond boundaries of the Catholic Church. So look, it's all true, but like the entire thing makes it seem as though God is walking on earth.
Yeah.
You know?
It made him seem like Jesus himself.
Exactly.
And look, I like the Pope a lot, but unfortunately, the press does this far too often. And we're going to get the criticism of their selection in a second here. But if somebody is, doing, in their mind, something positive, they're the greatest things. Remember Larry Summers, Robert Rubin, and Alan Greenspan, they were the Committee to Save the World. Mm-hmm. Like when there was economic trouble in the 1990s, I believe it was Time Again that put the three of them on the cover, the Committee to Save the World. And all these, and then glowing articles about, whether it's Tim Geithner or the former Church Secretary under Bush, Hank Paulson, the masters of the universe, and all these, like, the CEOs are great, the politicians are great, religious leaders are great. But if you challenge the establishment, you're crazy, you're dangerous. If you go back and read the Newsweek articles, now this happens to be Time, and I like Newsweek a lot in some respects, but go back and read their articles about Howard Dean and General Wesley Clark in 2004. Mm-hmm. They were more outsider candidates in 2004. They were viewed as a little bit more dangerous to the establishment. So Howard Dean, it was considered more progressive, and General Clark was an independent figure, and he was going to do whatever he thought was right. I mean, that hatchet job on General Clark was unbelievable. So they go to these extremes. Now, in this case, Pope Francis does do some of those things, and washing the feet of a Muslim woman is a powerful symbol.
It is.
And he's gotten rid of the Mercedes, and now he drives a Ford Focus. He lives in a smaller house. He doesn't wear the red shoes. He doesn't wear like golden crosses. Wears an iron cross. Look, we like the guy, and it's a worthy selection in another year. Okay.
Yeah.
And I think that he's an excellent candidate for Man of the Year. But it's got to be Snowden.
Yes. Okay. So let me tell you who the runners-up were. Bashar al-Assad was considered, of course, because he's made so much news considering the chemical weapons. Snowden, Edith Windsor. Edith Windsor was the one who brought the DOMA case to the Supreme Court, and of course, as you guys know, the Supreme Court eventually ruled that DOMA was unconstitutional, Defense of Marriage Act, and then also Ted Cruz. Now, these are all figures that made a lot of news this year, but you're absolutely right, Cenk. I mean, you read about the way they write about Pope Francis, and you realize that it's a safe choice. It's not someone that has ever challenged the establishment, and they're uncomfortable with people like Snowden. So they didn't name Snowden Person of the Year, which doesn't make any sense to me, because if anyone had any influence in the news and also in American politics, it's definitely Snowden.
So now, look, the Pope is the establishment. He's the Pope, right? But he's bringing Catholicism, not in the rules, because he's not changing any of the rules. Keep that in mind, right? But at least in imagery and symbolism and in some of the things that he's doing, a little further to the progressive side, more than progressive populist, to actually care about human beings. Exactly. I know, it sounds crazy, right? So that's a wonderful thing, but it's not. It's still a very safe choice. You're not going to go wrong by, people aren't going to be outraged that you picked the Pope as Man of the Year. Now, you could pick someone who's a bad figure. Of course, Hitler was Man of the Year as well. That's why Assad is an interesting candidate for the thing. But in terms of what affected the news the most, it's a no-brainer.
And continues to affect the news the most.
Every day there's a new article about the NSA. Every world leader is reacting to the spying in regards to the NSA. It's changed rules, perceptions, everything. When they look back in history as to what happened this year, I mean, the Pope is going to be a big story, but Snowden is a giant story.
I mean, it's the story of a whistleblower who made us realize that our democratic process is being put in jeopardy.
We just had 560 of the top writers in the world, including Nobel laureates, write a letter for the first time, get together and write a letter saying the NSA must stop doing what it's doing because it's destroying liberty, okay? That's because of Snowden. And on it goes. So we're not the only ones who disagreed with the selection.
Yes.
Glenn Greenwald disagreed, and as usual, he was fairly colorful in his disagreement. First, before they even put it out, he said if they don't pick Snowden, they would be the cowards of the decade.
Yes. Well, I guess they're the cowards of the decade because you know what happened. But he did speak to Talking Points memo, and he told them the following. It's a meaningless award from a meaningless magazine designed to achieve the impossible, to make time relevant and interesting for a few fleeting moments.
Damn. Nobody delivers an elbow like Glenn Greenwald.
He continues, though. I don't begrudge the choice of Pope Francis. Some of his pronouncements are impressive with the potential to achieve real change. But then he continues, Snowden is clearly by far the person who has influenced this year's news events. If it were a serious magazine with minimally brave editors, then of course Snowden would have been chosen, but I never expected him to be precisely because that's not what time is.
But see, look, so Glenn can be very harsh, and he's harsh there.
I like it, though.
No, but he's right. All you needed was just a little bit of bravery, because you know Snowden's the right choice, right? But they were worried, like, everybody's saying he should be arrested. I mean, he's really, this DC doesn't like him at all. He's in hiding in asylum in Russia. Ooh, that's edgy. And they just couldn't bring themselves to be that edgy. Like, they don't mind being edgy in like things that aren't going to actually get you in trouble. Fake controversies, like when they put the fat picture of Chris Christie up. Yeah. Right? Yeah. So, and it's not necessarily a right wing or a left wing thing, right? It's just that they're scared and they're like, and you know they had the meeting, they discussed it, and at the end, the editors got a little scared. They're like, well, everybody likes the Pope.
That's true. Yeah. And then some of you might be wondering, like, why is this even relevant? Who cares if Time magazine, one magazine, decides that the Pope is the person of the year? It's more symbolic than anything else, because I think it's pretty representative of what you see in the mainstream press, right? Whenever the Edward Snowden story broke, it wasn't really a conversation about the information that he gave us. It was more a conversation about his character. Is he an American hero or is he a traitor, right? And they totally changed the narrative of that entire story. So again, it's more symbolic than anything else, and it should make you question the way the mainstream press covers certain things.
And they would have had trouble writing this kind of glowing piece about Edward Snowden. And that's what they do. That's what they do.